The program you are about to see is part of a Cal State Fullerton President's Symposium, where we offered a forum to some of the nation's leading voices on the important and pressing issues impacting and challenging public higher education and our broader communities. We hope you enjoy the program and trust it will provide valuable insights about the important issues, impacts, and challenges facing us today. At Cal State Fullerton, our daily mission is education and knowledge creation. We're committed to being a leader in creating the future of higher education.
Good morning again. First of all, I do want to thank our president, Willie Hagan, again for hosting symposiums and events like this that is so key and important. And I'm telling you that the next speaker, you've heard, those of you who were here earlier, you would agree with me that there's no better opener when the last three speakers set up the stage for her going into education. And I am going to assume that maybe 99% of our audience here are educators, right? So you're going to love this session. It's all about us, why we're so important in this topic. And I was sitting there thinking about more and more about this topic of inequality. I go to a Chinese doctor, herbal doctor, and every problem I have, he attributes to imbalance of something. And so as I'm thinking about the topic of inequality, it is an imbalance of sorts. So if you think about things that it's not imbalanced, wheels not balanced, can't go. The bird's wings not balanced, can't fly. And so some of the pictures we saw this morning, it's really the ills, right? Symptoms of what's happening with our societies. And the next topic is what kind of prescription can we give? What kind of mechanism, what kinds of tools, vehicles, and what elements will make some contribution toward those ills? And education is the key. We are very, very, very excited about Dr. Susan Dynarski, who will be here to talk about the topic of the impact of education of this topic on inequality. She comes to us as an associate professor of economics, education, and policy at the University of Michigan. She is a faculty research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research and has been a visiting fellow at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston and Princeton University. She's editor of the Journal of Labor Economics in Education, Finance, and Policy. She studies the effect of public policy on education outcomes. She has examined the effect of college cost and college attendance and completion with a particular focus on this topic of inequality in these outcomes. She's been a tireless advocate about the importance of education and the impact of education at the Congress, Department of Education, as well as at the White House. She has testified to the U.S. Senate Finance Committee, the U.S. House of Ways and Means Committee, and the President's Commission on Tax Reform. The Institute of Education Sciences, Russell Sage Foundation, and the National Institute of Aging have all funded significantly to her research and her work. And she comes with an extremely prestigious academic background, holds AB and Master's in Public Policy from Harvard, and a PhD in Economics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So, ladies and gentlemen, you will be in for a treat from Dr. Dynarski's presentation.
For me, not increase them, but I'm very appreciative of the very kind introductions and lead up here. The story I'm telling today is consistent with what you've been hearing this morning, and I'm going to embroider it with some more details. So first thing to see is that in the US, education levels have been rising steadily for a good 100 years. I've got bonus slides for you. So as I was listening to the presentations, I added some more slides to my presentation. So not all of these are in your slide deck, but this is just in time, tailored delivery for you. So the top line here is the share of each birth cohort that has any college experience, has walked in the door of a college. And you can see for those who were born in the 1920s, right, that was 16%. That's this number here. And for those born in the 1980s, 66%. Right? So big increases, big historical increases in college going. A similar pattern occurred if you go further back in high school completion. So there was the high school revolution that took place in the last century. Our revolution is in college going. Below it, this is the share of the birth cohort with a BA. Okay, I don't include an AA here only because measurement of that doesn't go back far enough because it didn't exist. Community colleges only came into existence in the 70s, so just to have a consistent series, this just focuses on BAs. As you can see, however, the completion rate has not been rising at nearly the same dramatic rate as has the college entry rate, which is of concern for quite a few people. Move this scarf here. All right. Now, that's the overall level. That was the most optimistic slide you'll see, okay? Just to get back into form for the University of Michigan, MIT economists, back to the pessimism. All right, so inequality in educational attainment is rising considerably, okay? So what is this? This is a picture that shows people born in the 60s and people born in the early 80s, okay? So these are folks who, let's see, 1982 birth cohort, right? They're in their 30s now, okay? You can't, if you want to look at completed schooling, you can't look at people who were born in 2005, right? So you need to go back a bit. So, you know, I can't give you more current statistics because they're not getting to college age yet. So these are the most recent statistics that we have. These are from the NLSYs, which are a very rich resource for this sort of research. And what we've done here is we have, this is joint work with Martha Bailey, who's an economist at University of Michigan. We've split up the population by income quartile based on what your income was when you were a high school student. So when you were a teenager, what was your family income? So this is about economic mobility, right? So we're getting to the topic of economic mobility that a lot of people have flagged. If you look at somebody's income when they were a teenager, what happens to their educational attainment? Okay, so we've split up the population into the bottom 25%, next 25%, and the top 25% of the income distribution. Okay, so what this line here says is among those in the lowest 25% of the income distribution, born in the 1960s, 19% went to college. This is just the going to college outcome here. If you looked up at the top quartile, however, big gap, 58% going to college. Okay, what's happened between these two cohorts? Everything's gone up. Everybody's gone up in their college going rates, right? But note that the gaps between the growth is much larger for those at the top of the income distribution than those at the bottom, okay? So at the bottom of the income distribution, just a jump of 10 percentage points. Here, the jump is 32 percentage points, okay? So, 22 percentage points. So increasing inequality in college going. Everyone's going up. This is similar to the income story, right? Everyone's going up, but the people who are going up fastest are the people at the top. Right? And I'm going to show you in a few minutes the relationship between education and financial well-being, which will make clear that this is a key connection, a key way that we are going to see increasing income inequality, because this education is an important ticket to the middle class into doing well in our economy. And so these figures I find extremely disturbing. Okay, so what we were seeing before was the income inequality. As Kristen was saying, if you've got high levels of income inequality but high levels of mobility, everyone can try to grab that brass rod. Is that what it is? Thank you. Okay, brass ring. My kids, you know, that's a real game. My kid has played it. You know, they go around in a circle on a little horse and they grab the brass ring. He didn't grab it so well, so we'll see what happens to him. He may be downwardly mobile. So this is about mobility. This is BAs, and this is especially disturbing, right? So if you were in the bottom income quartile for this birth cohort, 5% were earning a BA. That's gone to 9%. At the top, it's gone from 36% to 54%. Okay? So this is, in proportional terms, a 50% increase in the gap between the bottom and the top. So this is also disturbing because the greatest income gains come from actually achieving the BA. There is a payoff to every increase in education, whether you just get 1 year of schooling, an AA, a BA, but it goes up with the level of schooling that you get. Okay? Now here's some information about why those gaps are disturbing. You know, we saw statistics about income inequality. One of the lines along which incomes are breaking apart, pulling apart in the US is education. Okay? So a lot of the inequality that we see is being driven by inequality, whoops, there we go, inequality by education level. All right, so there's a lot of information here. What we have here is for those who are working full-time, full year, and I'm going to show you some bonus unemployment slides in a moment. For those who are working full-time for full year, in their late 20s, early 30s, this is the time you'd be repaying your student loans if you had student loans. And we have constant 2008 dollars. We've put these into constant terms, inflation adjusted, and we're going from 1971 up through 2008. On the left are women, and on the right are men. And the lines in descending order are people with a BA or higher, some college or an associate degree, high school grad only, and here we have high school dropouts. Okay? And if we look over here, let's focus on the men for a second. Bottom line here again is the high school dropouts, high school graduates, some college, BA. What you mostly see here is everyone's going down except for the BA. Okay? So for pretty much men of every education level except for the BA, real earnings dropped. Have dropped since 1971. How is that consistent with what we were hearing before, that incomes are up for everybody, they're just not up as fast at the bottom? These are earnings of individuals. What you were hearing before was about household incomes. What's been propping up household incomes in the face of this is that women increasingly are working. Okay? And if we go back here, right, women actually, in terms of, again, this doesn't show that because this is just those who are working. An increasing number of women are among this set of full-time, year-round workers. So a break on income inequality in the US has in particular been the wives of the low-income men entering the labor force. So that's where you're getting the 3.7% growth over 40 years. So that's not much to look at to write home about anyway, but if it's coming from the fact that your family's having to work more, it's especially not going to make you stand up and cheer, right? So the inequality has been held back by women increasingly entering the labor force, especially the wives of these men here. Okay, the ones whose incomes are dropping. Though also up here, and increasingly actually, we have increasing, we call it, the fancy word is a sort of mating. You marry people like you, right? So what we see here is a parting of the earnings of those who get a BA versus those who are dropouts. These guys are more and more likely to be marrying these women, and these women are more and more likely to be marrying these men, right? People marry people at the same education levels, which also increases education inequality, right? So a lot of the bump up in income inequality at the top is because you have two people who are earning these higher levels of the people with the BA. All right, so there's a bunch of stories in this picture. The main story that we see here is that there's never been a worse time to be a male high school dropout, right? The gap between these lines is what the economists call the return to schooling. It's the payoff to schooling. What do you get by going to school? You get being up here instead of being down here. But if you're somebody whose father went to college, and you're going to college, if you look at what he made when he was coming out of college, maybe here, and here you are, you certainly haven't made big gains on him, right? If anything, you've dropped some. And guess what? Tuition's higher. And loan burdens are higher. So this is where we get people even who have a BA, who are the winners in our society right now, feeling aggrieved. So I think part of what's going on is a comparison with what your father or your mother was able to do versus what you are. Fact is, though, you can't choose to be here or be here. Your choice is, are you going to be up here or are you going to be down here? Right? So when I look around the education landscape, probably the people I'm least worried about are the people who've gotten a BA. Right? They're the people who are in the best shape. The people I'm worried about are the ones who haven't even made it through high school. Okay. What I showed you there were differences among those who work full-time, full year. Unemployment drops with education. So what we have here is 92 to 2009, and we have the same color coding, except now everything's inverted, right? Before the BA, this is my bonus slide. You're not going to find it. Everything is inverted now because the blue line is having a bachelor's degree, and it's the lowest one. Okay, it's the lowest level of unemployment. So even in the Great Recession, 4 or 5% is the unemployment rate for those with a BA versus 15% for those who don't have a high school degree. Okay, and this will show up in the overall household income inequality, right? Because it's going to mean that those earnings that we saw that were lower for those with a high school degree anyway, their expected earnings are going to be even lower because they're less likely to be employed in the first place. Okay, so having a BA, having an AA makes it more likely that you have a job, and if you have that job, that the earnings in that job are higher than they would have been otherwise. Okay, there was discussion this morning also, another bonus slide. I was adding them as I was listening to the talks this morning. Okay, the references for all of these are at the bottom and at the end of the slide deck. If you want to go in and see any of these publications, all the information's in there. Health insurance coverage rises with education. Okay, so it tends to be that the fringe benefits actually intensify inequality because the best jobs are the ones that tend to come with the best benefits. It's not like people are getting a fabulous health insurance package to compensate for the low wages at McDonald's, right? It tends to be that the high-paying jobs are the ones that also go with the pensions, that go with the health insurance, that go with all the other perks. Okay, so the gap as of 2008, was about 50% of those who are high school grads had health insurance coverage through their jobs, as opposed to 70% of those with a BA. All right. When we see inequality, as we saw there in college going and college completion, sort of one of the first explanations people jump to are tuition prices, that must be the source of it. Lower income people are less able to bear the higher tuition prices, and that must be a key explanation for what's going on, okay? And I have done extensive, price matters, okay? So price does matter, people are responsive to price. Is it the main explanation behind the trends that we just saw? I'm gonna say no, but it does contribute to it. First of all, let me go back here for a quick second to this figure that I showed you. Half of this inequality across income groups and college going and college completion is explained by high school completion. This is not conditional on graduating high school. This is unconditional. If you just limited this to those who had graduated high school, half of the gap would go away, right? So all along the educational pipeline, low-income kids fall out at a higher rate than high-income kids. It's not just at the college entry or college completion margin. It's, do you make it to 9th grade? Do you make it to 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade? You know, you can do a picture that just shows a steady decline in the share of low-income kids who are participating in any level of education, right? So just focusing on tuition and college entry would be missing much of the story. Okay, so 1/2 of the college entry difference between the low and high income quartile is explained just by whether or not you even went to completed high school. And then half of the gap in completion, or not half of the gap, but a big chunk of the difference in completion is explained by higher dropout rates in college of the low income kids. So once the low income kids get to college, they're twice as likely to drop out. Okay, so I work in post-secondary education policy, where there's long been this sort of myopic focus on the college entry margin and on tuition prices as the key levers for reducing inequality in educational outcomes. And what I'm just going around beating people over the head with is that those are not the only things that matter. They matter, but we have problems, a crisis in high school education, where low-income kids are dropping out there. When we get them into college, we're not getting them through college. They're twice as more likely to drop out if they're low-income kids. Okay, so our high tuition price is the culprit. Tuition prices have more than tripled. If you go back to 81, 82, this is normed to 0, and so what we see here is just proportional increases in all of these. Obviously, public 2-year started out lower than public 4-year, and private nonprofit tuition prices are the highest of all, so this masks that. But this shows that prices have been going up very rapidly. This is inflation adjusted, so this is net of inflation. Net of inflation, tuition at public 4-year colleges are 3.68 times higher than they were in 1981-82. Okay, so that's a big increase. That's my MIT economist speaking. That's big. Okay, in statistical terms, that's a big jump. All right, that's a slope, and it's nonlinear, right? Going way up, right around the turn of the century there. A key issue, though, however, especially, again, if we're focused on those low-income kids, sticker price and net price are different things. 2/3 of people in the US at this point do not pay. This is also not in your packet. I'm glad you're paying attention, but this is not in your packet. So look up at the presentation, watch the speaker. 2/3 of kids in college are not paying the sticker price. They're getting some form of financial aid. Okay, so a big story over the past 30 years has been a divergence between the sticker price, manufacturer's suggested retail price, and the actual price that you pay. Okay, how do these two differ? There's grant aid, the Pell Grant, for example, Cal Grant, right? Other such grant programs. Some schools have enough money to give out aid as well. So Cal, the UC system, is able to give out some money. I assume CSU also has some money, but not as much as the UC system. There are loans, right? So the government gives out subsidized loans, no collateral required for them. Those are the Stafford loans, the Stafford subsidized loans. There are also private sector loans, which are not nearly as good a deal, in which collateral and cosign are required. And then there's the tax credits and deductions, the American Opportunity Tax Credit, right? The Hope and Lifetime Learning Credits. All of these subsidize the price of college. Okay, so this is another very complicated figure. This one is in your packet. So what do we have here? We have 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, and then the private colleges over here. And we've got 4 periods, 95, 96, 2000, 2001, 05, 06, 10, 11. Within each of those, we have 2 figures. The dark blue is room and board costs. Okay, so you can sort of see that within public 2-year, not much growth in room and board costs, right, going from 6,000 up to 7,260. The more interesting stuff here, I would say, are the orange and light orange lines. The bright orange are the published tuition and fees. That's the sticker price. The light orange is the net tuition and fees, net of all that stuff I just described. Okay? Actually, it includes loans. It's just net of grants and the tax credits. Okay? And so mainly what you see here is that net price was $920 in 95, 96, and it was negative $670 in 10, 11. Right? That's basically because once you paid tuition at a 2-year institution, you had some money left over to pay for books or whatever else. Okay? Because the maximum Pell Grant right now is $5,500. Typical community college tuition, $2,000, $3,000. Right? So and that includes fees, required fees. Let's look more closely actually at the public 4-year. Okay? So in 95, 96, the sticker price was $4,000. The net price was $2,000. Jump to the present, the sticker price, eye-popping, right? Those are the increases. That's the tripling that I showed you before, right? The 7610. However, the net tuition and fee, $1,540. It's actually down some. Okay, so net, on average, it's actually down some. The Pell Grant, in particular, got massively more generous in the past few years than it had been before. So price matters. It may well be that, in particular, low-income kids don't know about this, right? So this is a concern among researchers and policymakers, is that people tend to systematically, they don't know this. They see, instead, they see this, right? The headlines are about tuition going out of control, right? And people, they publish Harvard's latest tuition and so forth. What they don't tend to publish are these net prices, okay? And this, what you see when you do surveys of families, they inevitably overestimate even the sticker price. And when it comes to the net price, forget it. They're totally out of the ballpark. So low-income families might be estimating that community college is triple what its real cost is, right? So even the sticker price, and when it comes to the real price, they're way off, okay? So while net price from the economist's perspective is what matters, when it comes to a low-income student deciding, or their parents deciding whether they can afford college, it may well be the sticker price that catches their eye. Okay, so wrestling with that and trying to figure out what to do about that is a big issue. All right, loans. I hear people may have been talking about loans recently. And here I just want to, this follows up on what I just showed you. Again, this is from College Board, Trends in College Pricing. Although average published tuition and fees increased by about 24% at public four-year colleges and universities from 05-06 to 10-11, by 17% at four-year institutions and 11% at two-year colleges, average net price for full-time students after considering grant aid and federal tax benefits declined in every sector. Okay, so real prices have declined in every sector. This is what keeps me going, is perverse findings like this, right? So, you know, bringing the facts out is the kind of stuff that gets me excited. Okay, what's up with debt burden? All right, so this is constant 2009 dollars again. The blue is the loan burden upon graduation per borrower coming out of public institutions. Down here, we have the percentage of the graduates who are falling into this category, who are borrowing for college. And it was 54% in 99-2000. It's 55% for the most recent data. And the debt burden was 19.5 in 99-2000 and 19.8 in 08-09. Okay? This does not have an amazing slope. Okay? So these are not stunningly large figures. Okay? These are not. This is not a sharp increase in either the share of students borrowing or the amount that they are borrowing. Private college is a different story, right? 80% of undergraduates go to public institutions. I just want to say that first. For the private colleges, the borrowing rate has been going up some, from 63% up here to 65% here. And among those who borrow, the level has gone up. You know, so where it started out at about 22, it's now about $26,000, $27,000, okay? If you look at the proprietary schools, that's where the big increases are. So those are the for-profit institutions that we've been hearing quite a bit about. That's where most of the growth in loan volume has been occurring. It is not happening at the public BA institutions. 20,000 bucks. So that's what the typical debt is for somebody coming out of a public institution. Is that a lot of money? Is that too much to ask for a college education? And I speak as somebody who's still paying her student loans. Okay, so I went for the 20-year payment plan when I was coming out of school. I borrowed for both grad school and for undergrad. I'm a first-generation college student. My parents didn't graduate college. My dad was a high school dropout. So I know I went to college because of student aid. I was able to pull it off because of student aid. It's the best investment I ever made in my life, besides my husband. But it's, so here is $20,000 in debt. And the typical payment term for that would be 10 years. That's the automatic payment plan that they put you into when you come out, level payment plan. If you were paying the current interest rate of 3.4%, that would be a monthly loan payment of $195. At that debt level, you have an option of turning it into a 20-year, which is what I did because I was very scared of whether I was going to be making enough to pay off my debt. If you do that, at the current interest rate, that's $114 a month. And at a 6.8% rate of interest, it's $150, okay? And just to put that number in perspective, The typical new car loan, according to the Federal Reserve, is $27,000, and at a 4.75% interest rate, the monthly payment for that would be $506. I make this calculation and I show this not to belittle these numbers. I'm afraid that the whole the headlines and the frenzy about student loans may be scaring off from student loans the very people who need them most. Right? So low-income kids need student loans to go to college. And if we kind of go bananas about debt burden and how horrible it is, they may well be scared of taking on this type of burden. $114 a month, $150 a month for a public BA is not a bad deal. Right? This is a fine investment. Over their lifetimes, people who don't have this picture, over their lifetimes, and this is a net of paying for college. What we have here is, sort of year by year by year, adding up what people make at different income levels. So somebody with a BA, even if you take account of the fact that they don't start working until they get out, is going to make, over their lifetime, $1.1 million. Okay? And somebody who is a high school graduate is going to make about $800,000. Okay? Difference there is about $400,000. Weigh that against the $20,000. Actually, this is net of the loan repayment. Right? So this is net of the loan repayment. So that's well worth a $20,000 investment. The design of the loans, I think, is poor. Right? So I think the fact that we are defaulting people into a 10-year payment plan, which falls into the period when incomes are lowest. Right? You come out of college, you're bouncing between jobs, your incomes are most uncertain. That is exactly not the time we would like people to have to pay off their loans. So spread it over a longer period of time. That's the 20-year repayment. Nobody asked me to pay off my mortgage in 10 years. Right? Your mortgage would look horrible if you looked at it on a 10-year payment plan. We pay it off over 30 years. Economists tend to think, and financial markets tend to think, that you pay for something over the lifetime during which it delivers benefits to you. That's why you get to pay your house for 30 years, but they only give you 5 years for your car, right? And nobody's going to give you a loan for lunch, right? Because you're going to eat it right now, and so you shouldn't be paying it off over your lifetime. That's what a credit card would be, actually, right? But your education pays off over your entire lifetime, right? We saw that it doesn't even just pay off in the labor market. It makes it more likely that you have a pension. Right? It makes it more likely that you live longer. I mean, there are lots of very strong evidence about the causal impact of education on morbidity, on age at which you die. Anything you can think of, education improves, including the next generation, in terms of their test scores when they're in high school, when they're in grammar school, whether they go to college, right? So it tends to pay on as well. All right, so that is my shtick. That is everything I have to say. Well, no, it's not. So ask some questions, and I'll say some more.
Questions? I did tell you you're in for a treat, right? Yes, please. And you can use the mic in the back.
I would agree in general that a student loan is a good deal if you can pay it off. But one of the things that college students have to worry about these days is whether or not they're going to have a job when they get out of college. A lot of them don't. If you can't pay your student loan back on schedule, you go into default. And right now, about 1 in 5 student loans are in default. And once they go into default, the cost rises astronomically. That $20,000 can become $80,000, $90,000, or $100,000 in just a very short period of time. And guess what? In 2005, a law was passed which eliminated the possibility of discharging a debt in bankruptcy if it was a student loan. So that means that if you have an illness, you lose a job for a year, or something like that, you can be in debt up to your neck for the rest of your life. And that's one of the reasons that low-income people often aren't willing to take that gamble.
So was there a question there?
Well, how do you fix that? How do you make it reasonable that the student loan is not going to become a lodestone around your neck for the rest of your life if you have some misfortune.
There are a couple of things that you said that I think would be a misrepresentation of the student loans. If you are unemployed, so unlike actually, say, a credit card or a mortgage, if you're unemployed, you can go into forbearance. So when I was laid off from my job in the early 90s, I went into forbearance on my loans, and I didn't have to pay my student loans during that period. People have to go seek it out, and it may well, but this is a design issue as well. If you are having financial troubles and things are falling apart, that may be a very difficult time for you to wade through all the paperwork that's required to file for a forbearance. Okay, so we should, another option is that you pay off, and again, I think this should be the default, you're under the income sensitive repayment plan, where what you pay is a fixed percentage of your income. Okay, so unfortunately, this is, I think, and right now the highest it can be is 10%. Maybe it's 15%, is the income sensitive repayment plan. Okay, so if your income drops because of an illness or because you're laid off, then your payments would drop as well. Only 8% of borrowers who are going into repayment are using the income sensitive repayment plan. This, I think, is a failure of government policy. I think it should be the default, right? But instead, they're making the default the 10-year plan, so they're setting people up for failure. Right? They're setting people up when they're young, and especially in a recessionary period. Now, one point I want to make, most of the defaults that are occurring right now are on loan debt levels of around, say, $1,500. The payment corresponding to that, would be well less than $100. Okay, so most of the defaults that are occurring right now are not $100,000. In fact, a very tiny proportion of people have debts of $100,000. Second issue is that this issue about debts not being dischargeable in bankruptcy has always been true of the federal student loans. That was not new in 2005. What was new in 2005 was they brought the private student loans into this. And I think this was an enormous mistake. And I think it should be undone. So the private student loans are ones that say they're not the Sallie Mae loan. Well, everything now is direct loan. Direct loan of the federal loans, those have never been dischargeable in bankruptcy. That's always been the case. However, there are private companies, especially, again, at these proprietary schools, that will give loans to people. So like Bank of America has a private loan portfolio. Right? They're not subsidized federal student loans. They are private loans. And somebody had the bright idea in 2005 to give them the same protection, even though they actually require a cosigner and they require collateral. Right? So we gave a big gift to the banks in 2005. We seem to like to give big gifts to the banks. And in particular, we gave them the gift that essentially these student loans, which I would think of as more as unsecured credit, they're like credit cards. They're credit cards for students. We gave those private banks the same protection that we were giving the federal loans, and that was an enormous mistake. And if you look at a lot of the sort of disaster stories that you see, they tend to be about the private loans. You can't get, as an undergraduate, taking out the federal loans, you can't get into $40,000 in debt. Okay, the maxima on these are such that about $23,000, $24,000 is the most you could end up with if you took the maxima each year. All right, we got a line now.
It seems like, well,
you're the guy who believes the New York Times. Was that you?
Me?
No? Who
No.
was the guy who believed the New York Times? That was somebody else. All right, never mind. I'm sorry I impugned your analytic skills there.
Some parts of the New York Times are better than others.
Yes, it's true.
Anyways,
That's true.
so it seems like a theme of your talk is that there is misinformation and incomplete information out there in the population, because you said that, a lot of these facts and figures that you show, like you said that if a lot of students were shown these, then like their attitude towards education would change. So is it, but what also seems to occur to me is that there are studies that show that your ability to navigate educational institutions and also like knowing like what resources are available to you are different according to like your class position. So is that another issue as well? Like, so a lot of like lower class, lower SES students and families, like they don't know what resources are available to them, and so they may take out private loans, so they don't have to. Thank you.
Yes. I mean, this is another reason why I think this is one reason actually why, so at this point, like something like 95% of undergraduates are filling out the FAFSA, even though by no means are 95% of undergraduates eligible for, say, the Pell Grant. But that's, by pushing students to do that, you are getting them into the aid system and getting them into the federal loan program, right? Which is, you can try to keep them away from the private loans. I think institutionally an important thing would be, again, to take away the bankruptcy protection on the private loans. This I think of as more of a consumer protection issue, right? As opposed to, this is, so the stories that we see, the horrible stories we see about very high student loan debts, if you look at the statistics, they're a really small proportion of the population. They're horrible outcomes, but they're a small portion of the population. When I see that, what I think from a policy perspective is two things. Insurance, insure students against that bad outcome. Don't design the policy for that 1% who are having the worst outcomes. And I think consumer protection. Like basically get out there and regulate these markets better so that people can't end up in those situations. Yep.
I'm asking this question as my degree is in education and I'm a fan of education. It's kind of a general question and you've answered a few specific parts, and that is separating the two aspects of education that we see in your graphs. One is truly the value added in a person's investment in their lives, but the other is the selective process of going through education. The prior question kind of alluded to that.
You're asking an econ-y question, actually.
Well,
so
it's
how much
not
is
a random
selection?
assignment,
How much is
obviously.
selection and how much is treatment?
Right.
So I showed you just simple crosstabs, essentially, in pictures, but there is a robust economics literature demonstrating the causal impact of education on outcomes. And everything that I showed you there, we have a corresponding causal estimate as well.
So some portion of the total would be causal and some part of it would be selection.
That's right. That's right.
Seemed like you were beginning saying, well, there's a lot of bad news. At the end, it almost seems like good news. So I'm not any comment on that?
No, because it's kind of like we saw those statistics in the beginning in terms of the inequality, and that is despite this and the net price being down, right? So we've pushed a lot of the levers when it comes to the design of student aid, so that if you, especially if you looked at this by income quartile, net prices have dropped substantially. So it's pretty clear that these classical ways that we use to try to increase college going and college completion for low-income populations ain't working. Now, that doesn't mean you should get rid of the Pell Grant or student loans by any means, but redesigning them in such a way that they do not scare off the population that we care about is pretty important. And one critical one, for example, would be making the default on the loans, income sensitive, for example, or a 20-year plan, right? Instead of what we do at exit interviews is that we put in front of them, well, pay it off in 10 years, otherwise it's going to look like this, right? So you got to do it now. And that's pushing them into a situation where it's hard to do it, given the current recession, and given the fact that coming out of college, that is when your earnings are most uncertain.
I think I need to save my honor here because I was the one who asked the question about the New York Times.
Oh, sorry.
It wasn't so much that I believed that they were saying that I had read in the New York Times. But anyway, the question I had, well, the comment that I made was that I think it was Paul Ryan in the Congress passed this sort of austerity budget in the House and to cut some of the safety net programs. And he said that by subsidizing student loans, it causes institutions to therefore increase tuition. And I wanted to, just for you to comment on that. Not that I believed it.
I have not read or refereed his paper on this topic. And I don't think anybody has. So I think Paul Ryan's got a political position and he's put a hypothesis in front of it. But we really don't have any evidence that the student loans are driving up prices. We do have some evidence that, again, the proprietary schools, the for-profit schools, tend to bump up their prices as the Pell Grant goes up. Okay, so those schools are very effective at capturing student aid. But if we're talking about the, and again, so this is becoming a consumer protection issue, right? So the vast majority of students go to public 2-year and 4-year institutions. So do we want to break or redesign the entire system? because the proprietary schools and the private lenders are causing problems, or do we want to do something to regulate them in a better way to protect students? Yep.
My question is that how do we bring awareness of the affordability of college to the lower quartile? That seemed to be one of the big issues about the affordability of college and whatnot. It's just awareness.
That's a good question. Yep. Education alone, so a lot of the emphasis has been on, so the Gates Foundation for a while was spending a ton of money on billboards and on publications trying to get this message out. Very limited efficacy in just sort of going out there and telling people this stuff. Defaults and program design seem to make a big difference. So, for example, in Australia, the setup and the way it's described for students is that when you go to college, it's free. You're not paying. You're getting a scholarship. But if once you graduate, you do well, which I think the cutoff is that you're making median earnings. You're making more than half of earners. That you start paying into the scholarship fund. This is an income-based loan repayment scheme, described a different way. It's the default for everybody. It's described as free when you're going, and if you do well, you're going to pay. And this differential framing can make a real difference. There have been randomized trials that show that how you frame the debt versus the grant setup can have a real difference on people's willingness to take up an investment. Even if something has, from an economic standpoint, that description I just gave you, that's exactly the same setup as our income-sensitive program. But the key program details are different. Are you defaulted into it? How is it described to you, right? How salient are the payments, right? So I would bet very few people in this room know how much they're paying for Social Security each month. Sheldon, other economists don't get to raise their hands on this, right? But it's coming out every month. It's coming out of your pay all the time. But you're not writing a check to the Social Security Administration each month. That's about, 6.8% that we pay towards Social Security, right? Per paycheck until we retire, right? And you don't tend to hear people screaming about the next big bubble, which is Social Security payments.
I have some family members right now who have one kid in college and another two going to college, and they're like higher income people, but their perception is that they tend to be people who go more to supporting like the Ryan Plan and these attacks on education budgets, because they feel like these programs aren't designed for, they're designed to take things away from people who have money to give it to people who don't have money in a kind of an unfair way. And I don't know if their perspective is really justified, but that's just kind of where, they come from. And I think a lot of these people who are supporting these programs are out there, attacking programs that are benefiting the poor. Maybe the perception is incorrect. I don't know that, they're benefiting upper income kids because some of these stuffs aren't even tied to family income, I'm assuming. So I just wanted to have you comment on that.
So some of the tax credits, for example, benefit, in particular, middle and upper income families. Everybody benefits from the fact that tuitions are held artificially low at the public institutions by everyone's taxes. But the raw fact is that people who have money don't want to give it away, right?
That's
so
it, yeah.
That would be your brother-in-law and sister. Is that who you said it was? Your cousins, right? So
I
they got money
them.
and they don't want to give it to other people. So this is not a question of efficiency or this is raw redistribution.
Thanks.
Okay, can we make this the final question?
Sure, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. I'm actually wanting to, I guess, look at what was discussed this earlier before our break, and then also your presentation as far as for public universities, tuition being fairly flat, but also hearing on the income issue that incomes are dropping when you look at net income. So how do you comment on the fact that although public education is flat, take-home income or income of families is dropping, and just make a little comment on that.
So that's the story I was telling when I showed you, this picture. These people are better off than these folks, but when they're comparing how well off they are to their folks who paid lower tuition levels, they feel bad, right? So You know, incomes have been dropping, tuition prices have been going up. Again, in the lower half of the income distribution, net of aid, prices have not gone up substantially in the past 10 years. They have gone up in the past 40 years, which is the scope of this picture here, right? So compared to your parents, you know, kids who are in college right now have something to complain about. However, they can't become their parents, right? They are doing a lot better, and they're in expectation. If they get that degree, they're going to be in good shape. I want to get in something, nobody asked it, but I'm going to say it anyway, about the interest rate subsidies. So a big discussion right now is about whether the interest rate should be allowed to go from this 3.4% where they are right now to what was the standard of 6.8%. That's where it was for a long time. It was brought down to the 3.4 as part of the stimulus. And indeed, that essentially was an effort at a stimulus, right? So if we have low interest rates, lower interest rates on loans are not primarily an issue about access for people entering college. Lowering the interest rate from 6.8% to 3.4% does not do anything for the current cost of somebody who's trying to decide whether to go to college. It benefits them 10 years out when they've graduated and they're paying it off. So it benefits their 35-year-old self, okay, which from a economic stimulus viewpoint, great, more money in the hands of people who are paying back their loans. If we're focused on getting low-income kids into and through college, I would say that a cut in the interest rate is probably one of the least effective ways to do it. Take that money, which is a ton of money, and put it into lowering tuition prices, into targeted grants for those individuals.
And Dr. Dynarski, isn't that in a completion agenda? Do you have a slide that actually shows those who have taken out the loans have higher and faster completion rate than those who are trying to have 3 jobs to make ends meet, but not on the student loan?
I don't have that slide, and I don't know. I mean, I think we still are unclear about, you know, sort of the causal impact of taking out loans. It does let you not work, right? It might let you go to one of the flagship universities or one of the comprehensive universities instead of going to the local community college. And we know that going to one of the universities means you're more likely to actually graduate and get a BA. So if taking out that loan means that you can go to an institution that's got more resources and can get you through, then taking out the loan would be a good thing to do.
All right.
She's got a question. Can we let her ask a
burning question?
I was just wondering, when you pointed out how lower income families or lower education have less access to loans, does that account in any way for the trend that people who tend to join the military tend to come from a certain socioeconomic status? I don't know the details about it, or the educational benefits provided, you know, once you're out of the military.
It's a pretty small number. I mean, so there are good education benefits that go with being in the military. That does not explain why low-income people are debt averse, as somebody mentioned. Right. So there have been sociological studies that indicate that it may be because their main experiences with debt have been with debt collectors, right? Things going bad. However, you tend to see these same populations are using credit cards with very high interest rates. Right? So it's a real puzzle for economists trying to figure out, okay, why is a credit card something that you're not scared to take out, but a student loan is, right? So it's not black and white in a way that we quite understand.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.